Today is September the 17th, 2004. We're at the 12th Armored Museum in Abilene, Texas. My name is Charlie Henson, and today I'm interviewing Raymond Ince. And I appreciate you spending time with us today. We're going to start out. I'd like to know your parents' names and where they were from, and about your family.
Well, I come from the town of Spur, Texas. And my father's name was, he went by D.B. Ince, but his actual name was Daniel Boone Ince. My mother's name was Mattie Ince. There were 7 children in my family. And I grew up in Spur and was in Lubbock when this all started.
At Tech?
At Texas Tech.
What year were you in when you?
I was in my sophomore year, and at that time everyone was registered, and there was a good possibility that we would be called before the end of the semester. So most of us enlisted so that they would let us finish the semester. So we actually enlisted and got to finish the semester that we were in, and then went into the Army or Air Force.
Where did you do your basic training?
Well, I was inducted at Camp Walters in Mineral Wells, and there was a lot of us from the college that went down. It was all there together. Some of my fraternity brothers were with us. The night that we got into Mineral Wells, of course, they had made arrangements for us to stay at a hotel, and we had already been inducted into the Army because we were reservists. We all wanted to try to get a beer that night. We were too young. The bartender wouldn't sell us a beer. Some second lieutenant from the regular Army that was there at Camp Walters came into this place where we were. He bought beers for all of us. And the bartender didn't like it, but he bought beers for all of us anyway. So I was inducted at Camp Walters.
Now you were not in the ASTP at Tech yet.
Yes, I wasn't then.
Okay.
That was when I was inducted, and I had enlisted in the Air Force. So I went to Shepherd Field in Wichita Falls to take my basic. So that's where I spent the basic training, was in Shepherd Field, Wichita Falls. And they had a hot summer that summer.
Was the training any different between the Air Force and the Army?
I think so, but I don't know the details of it. Basic training, I would assume, was all essentially the same, but the Air Force had their idea of how to train you, and I'm sure the Army had a different idea.
Can you kind of describe what the training was in the Air Force in Wichita Falls?
Mostly physical training, drill training, on the drill field every day. I can remember it was over 95 degrees, and they'd have us out there right after lunch, and they were bringing all these young guys from the north that had been climatized to 70 and 80 degree weather, and they slapped them into 95. The ambulances would be out on our drill field. They'd wait till they'd get a load before they'd take them back in. They was dropping out that fast. The boys just wasn't used to it. No, it didn't affect us too much because we've been living in 95 degree weather. But the ones that came in, they came down wearing sweaters, and that was their induction center also, and in their basic training. So it was tough on them.
So where did you go after your Wichita Falls?
In Wichita Falls, after basic, I was given the opportunity to go into ASTP, and they sent me to Texas A&M College Station, and that's where we did all of our testing. They had to take all kinds of tests, and evidently my scores were pretty good, and I ran into a person that I had known before, and he was, I don't know what position he was in, but something to do with the testing. He asked me where I would like to go back to college. Of course, I told him Texas Tech, and so then I was sent back to Texas Tech, and that's where I went through ASTP.
Was all the training in ASTP, was that engineering, or did you have different areas of study?
Had different areas of study. I actually completed, I think, 2 semesters, and we had everything. The English, math, engineering, and it's the regular courses. I had some of the same professors I had when I was out there before.
What was the goal of that ASTP? What were they down the road a bit if you had finished? What did you think was going to happen?
Officers Training School. My understanding of the whole concept of ASTP was that they were taking all of the top young people, putting them in the Army, and they were all being killed off. Nobody was going through school to get an education to where they could proceed and become officers and continue filling the positions that the officers were losing. It wasn't only in engineering. They had ASTP in all phases of it: medicine, language, especially foreign languages. In my understanding, the ASTP has a lot of different phases, not just engineering. Now, mine was in engineering, but there were a lot of others.
Tell me about the day or the week that you found out that they were closing ASTP.
I don't remember too much about it. I don't guess it bothered me too much. By that time, I'd already reached a point that I knew I had little or no control over what I was going to do. I knew I was in the Army, and I was going to go and do what they told me to do. So none of us knew where we were going, and stupidly, all of us kept saying, we hope we get into combat. So yes, everybody wanted to go to combat. But I don't think it bothered me too much that they closed out ASTP. Of course, I enjoyed that. That was very nice. We were living in the girls' dormitory. Of course, they had moved out, but I was living in the girls' dormitory on campus. A lot nicer conditions than I had when I was up there in school. So it was nice. I enjoyed it. At that time, I had a girlfriend there before I left. I still had her when I came back. I was still going with the same girl. We had very nice arrangements. She lived there in Lubbock.
Did you marry this girl?
No.
Okay. Okay, tell me about did you go straight to Barclay?
Straight to Camp Barclay.
Tell me the first day.
It took us, I believe, 2 days on the train to get from Lubbock to Abilene. They kind of sidetracked us a few times. When we got there, we were unloaded, and I don't remember anybody asking me what I would like to do in the 12th Armored Division. Some of the other ASTPers have said, well, they asked them, but I don't remember anybody asking me anything. I was told that I was to report to Headquarters Combat Command A, which meant absolutely nothing to me. I knew nothing of what it was. I was told to stand and wait till they came got me. The person that came got me was a Lieutenant Bomer. He was a company commander for Headquarters CCA. And it so happened that CCA was on maneuvers in the field. And we went by the barracks and dumped our stuff. They gave us 2 blankets, or 1 blanket, 2 blankets, I guess, and a half of a pup tent. And then we went to the field the first night. And it was the most miserable night I've ever spent in my life.
What date was this? Or month or season of the year?
It's summertime. Pardon me, wintertime. Closed out in wintertime because it's cold as heck. It's probably around It would have been end of the spring semester, so it would have been in January, February. And it was cold. No way we could keep warm that night. And we weren't accustomed to it because we've been sleeping in steam-heated girls' dormitory, brick, nice buildings. We were in a pup tent with 2 blankets. But the Lieutenant Bomer ended up being Captain Bomer and was head of our combat command, the headquarters company of the combat command overseas. He went overseas with us, or he took us overseas, more was a better wording.
Tell me about his personality. What was he like as a leader?
Well, he's a graduate of West Virginia Military or Virginia Military Institute, something Virginia. He was about my age, maybe a year or 2 older. Had a nice personality and was a nice person. Very nice person.
Did he lead by fear or lead by example?
Oh, lead, there wasn't much leading. He was in charge, and he told people what was to be done. And example, yes, he worked hard at his job. It wasn't hard to see that. But really the directions and the leading, if there was such, was really from the first sergeant. We took all of our orders more or less from the first sergeant.
What was his name?
Montgomery. See, his first name was, I can't get it right now, Montgomery, Sergeant Montgomery. He was from Michigan. He had been a beer truck driver when civilian life before he came in. He was big, older, rough, coarse. I guess he's a good first sergeant.
What you trained in at Camp Barkley, did that play out to be the same thing when you were in France?
No, Camp Barkley. To me that was. Wait a minute, you said Camp Barkley. I was thinking of our basic training. Camp Barkley, yes, we did the same things once we got overseas as we did in Camp Barkley. We had forced marches here in Camp Barkley, out through Buffalo Gap, all through that mountain area out there. And at that time, the position I was in, when I came in, the TO&E of the whole division was completely full.
Explain TO&E to us.
Table of Organizations and Equipment. All the positions were already filled. So we were all extras. I was a private, first class private. That's when we came out of ASTP. I just came out of basic, so I'd been a first class private all during my career. There were no positions open as such. We were the extras and we did all the extra duties. Most of my job when I was at Camp Barkley was to work directly with the officers in the Combat Command A and help them do what they had to do. They were the ones that were performing the duties. I guess you'd call, we were their errand boys. I drove a Jeep most of the time for them. I didn't drive for the company commander, Captain Bomer, very much, but I drove for all the officers in the CCA headquarters, which at that time we had a lieutenant colonel, 3 majors, I believe, and 2 or 3 captains. There were about 13 officers, and I drove for them as Lieutenant Colonel Ince, who later became General Ince, and I drove quite a bit for him. And for the S2, S3, and S4 majors. So my job was just to help them. We were kind of their assistants. The CCA was composed of CCA company and CCA headquarters. I was in the headquarters group that worked directly with the officers of CCA. Then there was a company that supported the headquarters.
What was that position? What did they do as they supported headquarters?
Well, what did they do? They did a lot. They were the company that backed up the Combat Command A. I'm sure you're aware the division was composed of Division Headquarters, Combat Command A, Combat Command B, and Combat Command R. Each one of those was a fighting group in its own and would be assigned troops to do a particular job.
Let's skip, for time, let's skip over to, let's look at the first combat that you experienced.
I can't remember. I don't know where it was or when it happened.
What's the first one that stays in your mind?
Herlisheim.
Okay. Can you talk to me about that?
Not a whole lot. I just know that it was, we weren't on the front line, of course. We were back supporting the frontline troops, and then division headquarters was back from us. But I know that I was close enough with the officers of CCA and helping them that I knew that things were bad. And when our group moved into Herlisheim to set up our headquarters, I remember the people that was in the field that were dead. We wanted to get them. They said, no, the field is mine. You don't go. They wouldn't let us do anything, of course. They knew what was happening. And I guess that's the most vivid part of my memories, is that area, in and out.
Was that as you heard that information, as you had to stay back and you couldn't go in? How was that? Was it demoralizing, or was it just felt like your hands were tied? What was?
Well, you didn't like it. Yeah. It wasn't very pleasant. You wanted to do something. You were mad. You wanted to do something. You couldn't. You knew, if you had any sense at all, you knew you couldn't. But that didn't help. So again, I think you had to learn, and that a lot of that stuff you just had to take and go on about your business. That I think that was what most of the people learned to do. They did what they could do when they could do it. They followed orders, and that was it.
Was that something that you think the Army tried to guide you through? I mean, was there kind of, you're going to be facing things that you're not going to like, but this is how we do it, or was that just a day-to-day experience that you kind of grew?
I don't think I ever remember being trained in that. I don't think I ever heard anybody ever tell me that. In fact, I'm not even sure I realized what was going on when I was there. I think this is something that I have kind of felt in my own mind. That's what happened, and that's what I was really doing. And I don't know. I'm not sure that I knew that that's what I was doing.
When you pulled back out of Herlisheim, what was the place? How was the headquarters? Was that about reestablishing, resetting up? What was that?
We pulled back and reset up, but I don't remember a lot about that.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I was always involved in getting the stuff on the trucks and getting them off, and helping the officers get all their stuff, and getting it set up the next one. But there was some confusion, but basically everybody knew pretty well what they were doing.
What y'all did? Did y'all go? Did you get a house, usually a house or something, and kind of move everything in and get it set up for a day or two? Or
once we got into Germany, we started doing that. When we were going across France, we couldn't. We stayed in the barnyards. We slept in the barns. But once we got into Germany, yes, I can remember at times somebody that was scouting it out would pull us down a street. It'd be kind of isolated street, and we'd just run all the civilians out, and we'd move in, take over their houses, and spend the night. And I've seen it when there was food on the table, it was in the middle of a meal, and they had to leave, and we finished their meal. Those days we weren't very choosy what we ate. We'd eat anything we could find. It wasn't K rations or C rations.
How did you feel the relationship of the people that you came in contact with, the civilians?
The civilians?
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, I liked the German people a lot more than I did the English or the French. The English and the French were arrogant and not too friendly to us. The Germans weren't necessarily friendly, but I think they were a whole lot more like the Americans. That's the way I remember them. And of course, after the war, that became even more evident.
Tell me, start me when you're breaking up and you've got everything packed up and everything. Take me through setting up the headquarters. Explain whatever you can about, like, okay, I've got him in the Jeep or I've got him in the trucks, I'm taking, and then how did you set that, how did you and your comrades set it up?
The first thing they started doing was setting up the message center, which I wasn't connected with communications, but I helped get all the information off the trucks in there to them, so the officers would have what they needed. So it's just a question of moving it in and officers getting the stuff that they needed.
Maps,
yep.
Radios.
Well, the radios was handled by the radio people who, in our company, we had their own message center, and they had, of course, the messages in their half tracks, and then they also would bring in and set up a message center. So it's just, they would set that up. I didn't have anything to do with it. I was just more or less as a messenger, helper.
Did you run messages back and forth, or or most of the time they had the wires?
On occasions I did. At one time, in one attack, I was getting ready to jump off. I don't remember where, but I drove one of the majors up a long way, and he wanted to get in contact with the I think it was a major of one of the battalions, major or captain. It's too long, I don't remember which. But we were up there most of the night, and I ended up going up and finding, after we got fairly close, we of course left the Jeep and the major stayed there, and I went up and found the captain and relayed the message to him as to what the major wanted to tell him and get the information that he wanted to give back to the major to take back to, I think he was General Ince by that time. But this was later, deeper down into the campaign.
Was that written things, or did you kept them?
This wasn't written. This was strictly verbal. I was to find out if they were in position, if they were ready to jump off at the time, which was, I think they were supposed to jump off daylight, and this was still real early in the morning. And some of the foxholes that I found, the soldiers were still in them asleep, and I finally found the ones that were up that was down on a little river, at the edge of a little creek, more or less, that when I found this officer. And I got the information, went back to the major with it.
I'm assuming since you drove a lot, you learned how to drive without your lights on, with the little tiny. Tell me about this. I've never.
Peep lights, cat eyes.
Peep lights, yes, cat eyes. Tell me about what that was like.
I can tell you one incident that I'll never forget. My relief driver was Eddie Basic, He's pure German out of Pittsburgh. Nice guy. He was my leaf driver. The only problem was he'd never driven a vehicle. He didn't know how to drive a vehicle and couldn't drive a vehicle. So we'd moved, I don't know, all night. It was up early hours of the morning. We're in the column, and you follow the cat eyes in front of you. And if those cat eyes go off in the ditch, you follow right off in the ditch with them, because you don't know what's there, and you just follow it, whatever it is. And the column would move a while and it'd stop, move a while and it'd stop. When it stopped, Eddie was supposed to wake up. I'd wake him up, and he was supposed to stay awake until the column moved, and then he'd wake me up and I'd drive. Well, that'd been going on hours, and I popped awake, and the cat eyes in front of me were gone. I looked over, and Eddie was sound asleep. A lot of vehicles behind me, so I started driving. I could barely see the road. I could make it out enough. It was going along pretty good. There's a fork in the road. And I didn't know what to do. I stopped. And a civilian woman come running out from the side of the road and started talking to me in German. I didn't understand a word of it. Eddie started talking to her. She said they went that way, went that way. I wouldn't take the word. Eddie and I both got out. We looked at the tracks. We determined that was the way they went. We started out. We finally caught up with the column. But that's heart-sinking. That's the cat-eye story that I remember. We'll never forget.
Wow. When you think, what, if you were to close your eyes and think about those days, is there one thing that stands out in your mind? Just kind of seared in your memory?
About what?
About anything.
No, not particularly. I remember a lot of the stuff. I remember a lot of the things we had to do, but something that stands out big, no. It's just we were there. We did what had to be done. I can remember lots of instances. One particular, we were in Colmar, and we had pulled in and set up our headquarters, Combat Command A headquarters. We set it up in what they call their rat house, which is the mayor's house, or the town hall. And the general by that time had a mobile vehicle that where he slept and had electricity and everything in that. That was where his living quarters were. But the rest of us was sleeping in a hotel right across the road. And that night I was on early duty as the CP, along with a master sergeant. And things had got quiet. Got dark, and everybody settled down. There was a knock on the door. I went to the door. There were two people there, a lady and a man. The man was dressed in a tux, completely dressed out. The woman, a long dress, beautifully groomed, and they started talking to him in German. And then the master sergeant come over. Between the two of us, we gathered that they had come to pay a visit on the general. And things weren't going too good. Incidentally, they had a bottle of wine in their hand. And I believe the master sergeant decided he was going to go down and get the general, wake him and get him. He probably wasn't asleep. He was probably doing something in his vehicle, but it was still fairly early. And before he could leave, here came one or two more couples, dressed in evening clothes. And by the time the general got up there, the whole headquarters CP was filled with these civilians dressed, and they brought hors d'oeuvres and wine and cheese. They were celebrating the fact that the Americans had liberated the town, and they came that evening to pay their respects to the general. And it turned out that they were there for about 2 to 3 hours that night. They even dug out a flag, American flag, that they said they had buried until the Germans came out of there. That was part of that area that were French and Germans, and they were waiting till the Americans could come in and free the town from the Germans. That is in Colmar.
How long were y'all in Colmar? Were you under the French Army at that point?
Yes, I believe that's right. I believe we were under the French Army. I remember they had a parade that the orders came through our company, but I wasn't in the parade. It had nothing to do with it. But I remember one of the infantry companies had to dress to march in that parade, one of our infantry companies, and nobody was really happy about marching in this parade to honor General de Gaulle. So I remember that much of it, but I wasn't involved in any of it. But yes, I believe at that time, I believe we were under the French First Army.
Tell me about the general's vehicle. You said it had electricity. What kind of vehicle was this?
It was kind of like I guess we'd call it now a mobile home. I think they'd picked it up somewhere in Germany. The electricity they had would be a little generator that they'd attach to it. The point of it, he didn't move into these houses like we did. He had his own living quarters. Incidentally, I've been back to Colmar, and I've been to that same room that I spent while I was there.
What other, these are great things for us to have. What other memory would you have that would be kind of like that, or some instances? You say, I remember instances of things happening. Do you remember the day that you found out the war was over?
Oh, yes. We already knew it was over, and a detachment was sent back to, I don't know where they left our luggage. All of our duffel bags were stored. And there was one vehicle and an officer's Jeep. They took my vehicle and I drove it, and then maybe we had a truck with us too. And we went all the way back to this town, and so we were away from our group the day that it was formally announced. We were in some town in France. We went all the way back to France to get all of our duffel bags. Everything had been left there except what they could carry on their back. So when it was officially over, I was in that town, and there was just one or two of us, and the French were all celebrating, but there wasn't a big deal, again, as far as I was concerned.
I've never heard the fact of leaving duffel bags and stuff back behind. Was that kind of a normal kind of?
Well, I think all of our division, I think all the people in our division left their stuff, and most of it, and they carried some of it. They had some of their duffel bags, but our stuff, I remember we went back to pick it up, and a whole lot of it. And that's where I was when the war was officially over.
What did you carry on your back? What did you take with you when you?
I had what they call them, musette bag, I believe is what they call it. It's about that big, and just my personal stuff, shaving stuff, and my canteen mess kits, and I think we were able to get a change of underwear, but that's about it. Everything else we just wore.
What kind of gunnery did you have? Guns? What did you
All
have?
I had was a carbine.
Okay. Was that kind of the normal thing with the headquarters?
Yes. Some of our people, the ones that drove the half-tracks had machine guns on them, and we had 3 tanks, and they had light machine guns. They were light tanks, and they had more armament and carried more weapons than we did. All I had was a carbine. We weren't really ever expected to be in contact with the enemy.
Did you ever see General Patton?
Yes.
Tell me about that man.
I can't tell you anything about him. I remember he came to our division one day, and I think I saw him, but to me, he's just another general.
So you weren't in
No, I wasn't
contact
close
with him
to him.
or
No.
talked to him?
We were in that drive to the Rhine under him, and I remember one night at the message center, Eddie, my friend, my assistant driver, worked the message center, and I was there with him, or he'd tell me about it right after or something, but General Ince had asked him to radio back for position of adjacent troops, and the message had come back from Patton's headquarters or from division headquarters. Somebody said, "There are none. You're 70 miles out in front." Now, we had our infantry and artillery and everything else there with us. We were sitting behind them, but there were no adjacent troops.
Did y'all wait for them, or did you go back?
I don't remember what. No, we didn't go back. I don't remember what we did, but I think we started pushing on the next day. I don't remember, but that was that drive that was made, that supposedly by the Mystery Division and all that. I've read more about it than I knew at the time.
Were y'all aware that you were a mystery division?
Oh yes, they made us take all identification off of all the vehicles, off all of our clothing, everything. So we didn't know we were going to be called a mystery division, but we knew we were not supposed to be identified. Made a big deal of that.
Was that in England? Did that happen in England, or did that happen when you hit France, Le Havre? Or do you know?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember when that happened. When we first landed in France, I think we were scheduled to go the opposite direction that would have taken us into the Bulge, but I think our orders were changed, but I don't remember too much about that. I wasn't involved in it, but I know that we were given, what was it, some kind of marks first, and that was going to Belgium, and instead they changed and we went the other way. I don't remember all that.
Was there, where did y'all's orders come from? Was it the headquarters?
Division
headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
And then tell us how it kind of went down the line.
Well,
the orders came down.
Orders would come to us, and our message center would send them out to the different divisions, or different infantry battalions and tank battalions. They would assign those different battalions to operate under CCA at different times. And we may have the 66th Infantry one time, we may have the 17th Infantry another time. And of course, all that was going through the generals. I wasn't involved in any of that.
If you were to think about yourself during this time, what would have been the thing in your character that helped you get through the war?
Patience. Accepting what's there and making the best of it. And I guess I got a lot of that during that time, and I guess it's helped me a lot since then. You take what you got and you make the most of it.
Tell me about the end of the war and then what you did post-war.
Well, when the war was over, they were sending people home by points. I had no points, so they didn't send me home. They transferred me to the 1st Armored Division. And I spent some time in Germany, the 1st Armored Division, and then finally they brought the 1st Armored Division home. I came home with the 1st Armored Division.
What was your job in the 1st Armored? What
Well,
did you do
before I left the 12th Armored, I was 1st Sergeant, and so I was 1st Sergeant in the 1st Armored Division, and I was in charge of a Combat Command headquarters coming back, in charge of it. I was 1st Sergeant of it. I wasn't in charge of nothing. The men were under me. I passed the orders down to them. And a lot of the people that were in that company had fought in all different organizations during the Army, during the war. They had kind of put them all together to bring them back. There was just kind of a vehicle they put together to bring us all back. There were 2 people, I can't even remember their names, and I can't remember what outfit they fought in, but they were in the 1st Armored coming back, and they told me that when we got to Camp Chaffee no, it wasn't Camp Chaffee. That's where we were discharged. When we got to New York, and I don't remember, one of those places in New York that the soldiers all came back to, said, if you'll get us passes to New York, we'll take you into New York and show you the city. They had both lived in New York. They had been in the advertising and promotional business in New York, and they knew everything. I said, I don't know whether I can get passes or not, but I'll sure try. Well, I had nothing to do with getting the passes. Just about everybody got a pass that wanted to pass. But we went into New York, and we spent one night in New York. They had me in every nightclub and every bar in New York, and I have pictures that was taken with the boxer Bear. No, I can't remember. I just have the pictures. And we didn't buy any drink. Nobody would let us buy a drink. We had the whole evening, and we went from one place to another. We saw some shows at these nightclubs, and people were very friendly, very nice, and we didn't buy drinks. We had drinks whenever we wanted. Yogi Bears. No, that Yogi Bear is the basketball. What's the boxer's name?
I don't remember.
I've got a picture of him and the 3 of us, or the 3 of us and him.
Well, did you go back to Spur, Texas?
I went back to Texas Tech. I went to Spur was my home, and yes, I went back to Spur first, and went back into college at Texas Tech, and finished there.
And what have you done post-war? What career did you do?
Heating and air conditioning. I started a year before I got out of college. One of my fraternity brothers his father had a plumbing company in Lubbock, and they were trying to get into the heating and air conditioning business. That was just beginning to develop. And he suggested or talked me into coming to work for them during the time I was in college, helping doing some drafting on these plans for heating and air conditioning. He was an engineer just like I was an engineer. And I started working there in the plumbing company. I had to work all the time I was in college. I had no help, so whatever I had in college I had to earn. With the GI Bill, I was in pretty good shape. But I was working, and one of the partners in that plumbing company split off from the plumbing company and started a wholesale distributing ship of plumbing supplies and branched out into the heating and air conditioning. And the heating and air conditioning that he took on was General Electric. And I had done some work with him in the plumbing company, and so when he started the supply house, he wanted me to come over and start working part-time for him in the supply house rather than the plumbing company, because the work I was doing in the plumbing company really moved to the distributing company. So I worked for him the last year and a half I was in college, and then when I was graduating, I interviewed with the people that came on campus. One of the people I interviewed with was General Electric Company, and they offered me a job in their heating and air conditioning division to go to Schenectady and go through their training school, and I accepted that. And all the time, this man that I was working for, his name was Buster Welch, kept asking me what I was going to do when I finished college, and I told him. He said, "Wouldn't you like to stay here and be our heating and air conditioning engineer?" No, I wanted to go to the factory, to the head of it, and find out what he's all about. And hopefully after I did that, I could come back out into West Texas and be a field engineer. The field engineers that were calling on us for General Electric were out of Dallas. And they came out from Dallas and worked with us, worked with me. And it's my goal to get to be one of those field engineers. Well, as time drew closer, I finally decided I didn't want to go to Schenectady, New York. So I went back to Buster, and I said, "Well, what if I decide to stay here?" He said, "Fine, job's yours if you want it." I said, "Well, what are you going to pay me?" He said, "Well, I don't know. What did GE offer you?" So I told him, and he said, "Well, I really had in mind a little more than that." I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't very much in today's money. But I stayed with him and started my career in heating and air conditioning as I got out of college. And those field engineers from Dallas had been coming out visiting Buster regularly, trying to get the job that he was offering me. I found that out later. So since then, for 50-something years, I've been in the heating and air conditioning business.
Are you in Lubbock?
No, I'm in San Antonio.
Oh, okay.
The heating and air conditioning that does this building, I donated all of it.
That's you. I was wondering if you had done
Yes.
that. Yeah, yes.
I set it up, got it all for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I knew somebody wonderful did that. Tell me about your family.
I have a wonderful family. I married a girl after I got out of the Army. She was from Dallas. I met her after I came back. An interesting part of that I don't tell many people is that I had gone to Dallas to visit her. This was in the summer, and all the college kids were getting together, and they were all going to some place where all the college people were going to meet and hang out. So an awful lot of people from Texas Tech were out there. And the girlfriend that I'd had prior to going overseas, and had her a long time while I was overseas, lost it during that time, she came by the table. She leaned across Lois, my present wife, and was talking to me, and turned to somebody next to her and said, "I'm going to marry him. It's just a question of time." She, at that time, was a hostess for one of the airlines. She was a nice girl, and I liked her, but it was more of a friendship thing. And Lois will never forget that, my wife. So I have a wife. I have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. I have a company in San Antonio. I started the company in '57. We've been there ever since. All four of my children came into the business with me. I didn't ask a single one of them. All I ever told them, if they wanted to come to work for me, I would make a place for them. I've lost one of my sons about 2 years ago, but the other three are still in the company. In fact, right now they run the company.
I want to ask one more thing. If someone were to get this tape in 50 years, what would be the one thing you would want to leave with them? Either something you learned about yourself or that you would like for them to know that you felt about this time?
I don't know. I guess there's a whole lot of things. Right now, there's a whole lot of animosity between the association and the museum. I think this is the biggest bunch of hogwash I've ever heard. The museum and the association should be one. They should be striving to leave our legacy through the museum. The thing, I guess, that I've learned, I said it earlier, you have to take what you've got and you have to make the most of it. You try to improve it, you try to make it better, try to go forward, but you don't look back. You take what you got and do with it.
I appreciate your time today and your sharing of your experiences, and I thank you for helping get this building together and this museum.
I don't know how this is going to help anybody, but it's fine. I'm glad to do it.
Thank you.